I do not wonder, for it must have been a very comical sight. In a second more somebody sprang forward and snatched pussy up. Such a scream as she gave, and scratched his face with her claws, so that he was glad to put her down. As soon as I heard her voice, I turned round and called her in a low tone. She ran quickly to me, and I picked her up and carried her in my arms the rest of the way, but I saw even my own papa and mamma laughing a little for just a minute. That was the only funeral Pussy ever attended. Pussy lived several years after the events which are related in these letters. It was a long time before her fur grew out again after the terrible fall into the soft soap barrel. However, it did grow out at last, and looked as well as ever. Nobody would have known that anything had been the matter with her, except that her eyes were always weak. The edges of them never got quite well, and poor Pussy used to sit and wash them by the hour, sometimes mewing and looking up in my face with each stroke of a paw on her eyes, as much as to say, "Don't you see how sore my eyes are? Why don't you do something for me?" She was never good for anything as a mouser after that accident, nor for very much to play with. I recollected hearing my mother say one day to somebody, "Pussy was spoiled by her experience in the cradle. She would like to be rocked the rest of her days, I do believe. And it is too funny to see her turn up her nose at tough beef. It was a pity she ever got a taste of tenderloin." At last, what with good feeding and with very little exercise, she grew so fat that she was clumsy, and so lazy that she did not want to do anything but lie curled up on a soft cushion. She had outgrown my little chair, which had a green moreen cushion in it, on which she had slept for many a year, and of which I myself had very little use. She was in it so much of a time. But now that this was too tight for her, she took possession on the most comfortable places she could find all over the house. Now it was a sofa, now it was an armchair, now it was the foot of somebody's bed. But wherever it happened to be, it was sure to be the precise place where she was in the way, and the poor thing was tipped headlong out of chair, shoved hastily off sofas, and driven off bed so continually that at last she came to understand that when she saw any person approaching the chair, sofa, or bed on which she happened to be lying, the part of wisdom for her was to move away. And it was very droll to see the injured and reproachful expression with which she would slowly get up, stretch all her legs, and walk away, looking for her next sleeping place. Everybody in the house except me hated the sight of her, and I had many a pitched battle with the servants in her behalf. Even my mother, who was the kindest human being I ever knew, got out of patience at last, and said to me one day, "Helen, your pussy has grown so old and so fat, she is no comfort to herself and a great torment to everybody else. I think it would be a mercy to kill her." "Kill my pussy!" I exclaimed, and burst out crying so loud and so hard that I think my mother was frightened, for she said quickly, "Never mind, dear, it shall not be done unless it is necessary. You would not want Pussy to live if she were very uncomfortable all the time." "She isn't uncomfortable," I cried. "She's only sleeping. If people would let her alone, she would sleep all day. And it would be awful to kill her. You might as well kill me." After that, I kept a very close eye on Pussy, and I carried her up to bed with me every night for a long time. But Pussy's days were numbered. One morning, before I was up, my mamma came into my room and sat down on the edge of my bed. "Helen," she said, "I have something to tell you which will make you feel very badly. But I hope you will be a good little girl and not make Mamma unhappy about it. You know your papa and Mamma always do what they think is the very best thing." "What is it, Mamma?" I asked, feeling very much frightened, but never thinking of Pussy. "You will never see your Pussy any more," she replied. "She's dead." "Oh, where is she?" I cried. "What killed her? Won't she come to life again?" "No," said my mamma. "She's drowned." When I knew what was happened. "Who did it?" was all I said. "Cousin Josiah," she replied, and she took great care of that Pussy did not suffer at all. She sank to the bottom instantly. "Where did he drown her?" I asked. "Down by the mill in Mill Valley, where the water is very deep," answered my mother. "We told him to take her there." At these words I cried bitterly. "That's the very place I used to go with her to play," I exclaimed. "I never go near that bridge as long as I live, and I will never speak a word to Cousin Josiah either, never." My mother tried to comfort me, but it was of no use. My heart was nearly broken. When I went to breakfast, there sat my cousin Josiah, looking as unconcerned as possible, reading a newspaper. He was a student in the college and boarded at our house. At the sight of him, all my indignation and grief broke forth afresh. I began to cry again, and running up to him, I doubled up my fist and shook it in his face. "I said I'd never speak to you as long as I lived," I cried. But I will. You're just a murderer, a real murderer. That's what you are. And when you go to be a missionary, I hope they'll eat you alive, raw. You mean old murderer. Helen Maria, said my father's voice behind me, sternly. Helen Maria, leave the room this moment. I went away, sullenly muttering, I don't care. He's a murderer, and I hope he'll be drowned if he isn't eaten. The Bible says the same measure your meat shall be meeten to you again. You aren't to be drowned. For the sullen muttering, I had to go without my breakfast, and after breakfast was over, I was made to beg cousin Josiah pardon. But I did not beg in my heart, not a bit, only with my lips, just repeating the words I was told to say. And from the time I never spoke one word to him, nor looked at him, if I could help it. My kind mother offered to get another kitten for me, but I did not want one. After a while, my sister Anne had a present of a pretty little grey kitten, but I never played with it, nor took any notice of it all. I was as true to my pussy as she was to me, and from that day to this I have never had another pussy.